It was hilarious. You should have seen yourself sleeping while I escaped. My name's Connell. I'm 31, work as a mechanical engineer back in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was staring at that text message in a Stockholm hotel room at 7 in the morning. My wife Veronica was gone. Her suitcase was gone. The bathroom was empty of her toiletries. The only thing she left behind was me and a growing knot in my stomach. I called the front desk. The clerk spoke perfect English with that measured Swedish accent. Yes, Mr. Harrison. Your wife checked out at 3 this morning. She took the airport shuttle. Said you had different departure arrangements. Different arrangements. I pulled up our flight confirmation on my phone. 2 seats on the same flight to Louisville, departing at 6 p.m. today. But when I called the airline, they told me something that made my blood turn cold. Mr. Harrison, your wife called yesterday afternoon and changed your booking. She's already departed on the 6 a.m. flight to Chicago. Your reservation has been moved to next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, 5 days from now. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, reading her text again. The words felt like a slap. She thought abandoning me in a foreign country was funny. She thought planning an escape while I slept was creative. She thought leaving me stranded without warning was some kind of brilliant prank. The thing is, this wasn't completely out of character for Veronica. She'd always been what she called spontaneous. Last year, she invited 30 people to our house for Thanksgiving without telling me. The year before, she spent our vacation fund on a pottery wheel she used exactly twice. But this felt different. This felt cruel. I walked to the hotel lobby, trying to figure out my next move. The embassy wouldn't open until 9. I could try to change my flight, but the cost would probably be astronomical. Meanwhile, Veronica was probably already back in Kentucky, probably already telling her friends about her hilarious midnight escape plan. That's when I noticed her. A woman about my age with blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, checking in at the front desk. She had a rolling suitcase covered in travel stickers and carried a laptop bag that looked well used. When she turned around, I caught her blue eyes and something in my chest loosened just slightly. She overheard me talking to the desk clerk about changing rooms, about my wife's sudden departure, about needing help with embassy information. Her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine concern. Something told me this woman wouldn't think abandoning someone in a foreign country was hilarious. I'd known Veronica since college. We met in a chemistry lab where she was my partner for a semester-long project. She was beautiful, unpredictable, and completely different from anyone I'd ever dated. Where I planned everything down to the minute, she lived by inspiration. Where I saved money and made lists, she bought whatever caught her eye and figured out the details later. For 5 years, I thought those differences balanced us out. I thought her spontaneity made me more adventurous, and my stability gave her a foundation to build on. We got married 3 years ago in a ceremony she planned entirely in 2 weeks after deciding our original 6-month timeline was too boring. But lately, her spontaneity had started feeling more like selfishness. The Thanksgiving surprise left me scrambling to buy groceries and clean the house while she took a nap because entertaining is exhausting. The pottery wheel incident meant we couldn't afford the vacation we'd planned for months. And now this. Sweden had been my idea. I'd saved for 2 years to afford this trip, planned every detail, researched the best restaurants and museums. Veronica had seemed excited, though she kept joking about wanting to shake things up and make it an adventure to remember. I should have paid attention to that last part. The woman from the lobby introduced herself as Elsa. She was a marine biologist from Gothenburg in Stockholm for a conference on Arctic shipping routes. When I explained my situation, she didn't laugh. She didn't call it creative or spontaneous or hilarious. "That's horrible," she said simply. "You must feel completely betrayed." The word hit me like a physical blow. Betrayed. That's exactly what I felt, but I'd been trying to convince myself it was just frustration, just Veronica being Veronica. But Elsa was right. This wasn't a harmless prank. This was betrayal. She helped me contact the embassy, showed me how to use the local transit system to get there, even offered to come with me if I needed moral support. When I asked why she was helping a complete stranger, she shrugged. In Sweden, we have a concept called lagom. It means balance, fairness. What your wife did wasn't fair. It wasn't balanced. Someone should help you restore that balance. Over coffee, she told me about her research, about the ways shipping patterns were changing Arctic ecosystems. She listened when I talked about engineering, about the bridge designs I'd been working on back home. She didn't interrupt, didn't change the subject to herself, didn't make jokes about my problems. It had been months since I'd had a conversation like that with Veronica. By day 3, Veronica's texts had shifted from gleeful to concerned to annoyed. "Why aren't you responding?" Followed by, "You're being dramatic." Followed by, "It was just a joke, Connell. Just a joke." Like leaving someone stranded in a foreign country was the same as hiding their keys or putting salt in their coffee. I was walking through Gamlistan with Elsa, who had insisted on showing me the real Stockholm instead of the tourist traps I'd marked on my itinerary. She pointed out architecture details I never would have noticed, told me stories about Swedish history that weren't in any guidebook. We stopped at a small cafe where the owner recognized her and brought us pastries without being asked. "You've been here before," I said. "My grandfather owned this place. I spent summers here when I was little, learning to make coffee and listening to his stories about the war." There was something in her voice, a warmth and continuity that made me think about family, about roots, about the way people could choose to care for each other across generations. Then I thought about Veronica, probably already planning her next adventure, probably already bored with the story of her midnight escape. That night I called my best friend Tyler back home. He'd known Veronica almost as long as I had. "She actually left you there?" he said. "Jesus, Connell. That's not funny. That's sociopathic." The word hit me harder than Elsa's betrayed had. Sociopathic. Was that what this was? Not just selfish or thoughtless, but actually cruel. "She's been texting me nonstop," I said, getting more upset that I'm not laughing along with her joke. "Because it wasn't a joke," Tyler said. "Jokes don't leave people stranded and confused in foreign countries. Jokes don't cost thousands of dollars to fix. This was something else." After I hung up, I sat in my hotel room looking at Stockholm through the window. The city lights reflected off the water, peaceful and steady. Elsa had invited me to dinner tomorrow with some of her colleagues from the conference. She'd mentioned it casually, like including a stranded American in her professional social life was the most natural thing in the world. I thought about the difference between Elsa's invitation and Veronica's abandonment. One was offered freely with no expectation of entertainment value. The other had been calculated specifically for its shock and disruption. I picked up my phone and scrolled through Veronica's increasingly frantic messages. Then I turned it off and went to sleep. For the first time in 3 days, I slept through the night without waking up angry. On day 4, I decided to test something. I turned my phone back on and read through Veronica's messages. 23 of them, escalating from playful to demanding to genuinely worried. The most recent one, sent at 2 a.m. Stockholm time, read, "Connell, this isn't funny anymore. Call me." I typed back, "Having dinner with a friend tonight. Talk later." The response came within minutes. "What friend? You don't know anyone in Stockholm." I stared at that message for a long time. She was right that I hadn't known anyone in Stockholm when we arrived. But the assumption that I couldn't possibly make a connection, couldn't possibly find someone who would want to spend time with me, said more about how she saw me than I wanted to acknowledge. The dinner was at a restaurant Elsa's colleague recommended, a place tucked away in Södermalm that served traditional Swedish food with a modern twist. The conversation flowed easily between English and Swedish, and when I mentioned my confusion about some local customs, everyone was eager to explain without making me feel stupid. Dr. Anderson, a climatologist in his 50s, asked about my engineering background and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts on infrastructure challenges in cold climates. Dr. Lindqvist, a younger woman studying marine pollution, wanted to know about American approaches to environmental regulation. Elsa sat beside me translating the occasional Swedish phrase, but mostly just smiling as I found my footing in the conversation. "Your wife," Dr. Anderson said during dessert. "She wasn't interested in joining us?" I'd explained the situation briefly when Elsa introduced me. The entire table had gone quiet for a moment before Dr. Lindqvist had said something sharp in Swedish that made the others nod grimly. She had other priorities, I said. When we left the restaurant, Elsa walked me back toward my hotel. The Stockholm summer air was cool but comfortable, and the city felt alive around us despite the late hour. Your friends are wonderful, I said. They liked you too. Elsa said you ask better questions than most of the American researchers who come to her conferences. We stopped at a small park overlooking the water. The sun was setting somewhere behind the buildings, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed impossible for 10 p.m. Can I ask you something? Elsa said. When you describe your marriage, you always talk about what your wife does. You never talk about what you do together. The observation hit me like a diagnosis I hadn't wanted to face. She was right. With Veronica, I was always reacting, always adjusting, always trying to keep up with her latest inspiration or clean up after her latest abandonment of responsibility. I couldn't remember the last time we'd planned something together, built something together, chosen something together. We used to, I said weakly. When? I thought about it. Really thought about it. College, maybe. That first year. 7 years ago. Yeah. Elsa was quiet for a moment, watching a boat navigate the channel between islands. In my work, when an ecosystem stops functioning, it's usually because one species has become parasitic. It takes what it needs without giving anything back, and eventually the whole system collapses. I knew she wasn't talking about marine biology anymore. That night I called Tyler again. It was afternoon in Kentucky, and he was at work, but he took the call anyway. She's been calling me, he said before I could speak. Veronica. She wanted to know if I'd heard from you, if I knew what was wrong with you, why you weren't appreciating her creativity. What did you tell her? I told her that abandoning your spouse in a foreign country wasn't creative. It was cruel, and that if she couldn't see the difference, she had bigger problems than your silence. I closed my eyes. How did she take that? About like you'd expect. She hung up on me. Day 5 brought revelation in the form of a phone call from my sister Beth. She was crying, which immediately set off alarm bells because Beth never cried about anything. Connell, I'm so sorry. I should have said something years ago. Said something about what? About Veronica. About the way she treats you. I thought it was just her personality, but what she did to you in Stockholm, that's not normal, Connell. That's not how people treat someone they love. Beth told me things I hadn't known she'd noticed. How Veronica always scheduled activities during times when she knew Beth was visiting, effectively keeping us from spending time together. How she'd made comments about Beth's divorce that were supposedly supportive but actually condescending. How she'd suggested that maybe Beth was too negative for family gatherings after my father's funeral. She's been isolating you, Beth said. Slowly, systematically, and I just watched it happen because I thought you were happy. After that call, I sat in a Stockholm cafe and made a list. Not of things to do or places to see, but of patterns I'd been ignoring. Veronica's spontaneous decisions that always seemed to cancel my plans. Her helpful suggestions that usually meant I did more work while she did less. Her adventures that consistently put me in difficult or expensive situations while entertaining her. The midnight escape wasn't an anomaly. It was an escalation. That evening, Elsa invited me to her colleague's apartment for a casual dinner. It was a small gathering, maybe 8 people, and they included me in conversations about everything from Swedish politics to the best hiking trails near Stockholm. No one performed for attention. No one hijacked conversations or created drama for entertainment. People listened to each other, built on each other's ideas, laughed at genuinely funny things. It was the most relaxed I'd felt in years. After dinner, Elsa and I walked through the old town. The medieval streets were quiet, lit by street lamps that cast long shadows between ancient buildings. You seem different tonight, she said. How? More yourself, maybe. Less like you're waiting for something to go wrong. I thought about that. With Veronica, I always am waiting for something to go wrong. For the next surprise, the next crisis, the next thing I'll have to fix or pay for or apologize for. That sounds exhausting. It is. We stopped outside my hotel. The night desk clerk nodded at me through the window. I'd become a familiar fixture over the past few days, the American who'd been abandoned but was somehow still smiling. "Connell," Elsa said, "can I tell you something my grandmother used to say?" "Sure." She said that some people will set your house on fire just to watch you put it out, and they'll call it entertainment. I looked at her face in the lamplight, at the kindness in her expression, at the way she'd spent 5 days helping a stranger without asking for anything in return. "What do you do about people like that?" I asked. "You stop giving them matches." My phone buzzed. Another message from Veronica. "I'm starting to get worried. This silent treatment isn't like you." I showed Elsa the message. She read it and shook her head. "She's not worried about you," she said. "She's worried about losing control of you." Standing there in the Stockholm night, with a woman who had shown me more genuine care in 5 days than my wife had in months, I finally understood the difference. Day 6 was the day I stopped being a victim and started being strategic. I woke up early and did something I hadn't done in years. I made a plan for myself based on what I wanted, without considering how anyone else might react to it. I wanted to spend the day with Elsa. I wanted to see more of Stockholm. I wanted to have conversations that didn't revolve around managing someone else's chaos. Elsa met me for breakfast at a small place near the water. She'd finished her conference presentations and had the day free. "Where would you like to go?" she asked. "Somewhere you love," I said. "Not somewhere you think a tourist should see. Somewhere that matters to you." She smiled, and I realized it was the first time I'd made a decision in months without calculating how it might affect Veronica's mood. We took a ferry to one of the outer islands, a place called Vaxholm that Elsa had visited as a child with her family. The town was small and picturesque, with wooden houses painted in bright colors and a fortress dating back to the 16th century. But more than the scenery, I loved watching Elsa navigate familiar streets, greeting shopkeepers who remembered her, showing me the dock where she'd learned to swim. "This is where I come when Stockholm feels too big," she said, as we sat by the water, sharing coffee and cardamom buns from a local bakery. My phone had been buzzing all morning. Veronica's messages were getting more frequent and more frantic. I showed a few to Elsa. "You're scaring me with this silence. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic. Just tell me you're okay and I'll stop worrying." "Each message is about her feelings," Elsa observed, "not yours. Even when she says she's worried about you, she's really expressing frustration about how your behavior affects her." That afternoon, we visited the Fortress Museum. The guide explained how the building had been designed to defend Stockholm from maritime attacks, how its position allowed it to control access to the inner archipelago. "Strategic positioning," the guide said. "The fortress wasn't just strong, it was smart about where it placed itself." Walking back to the ferry, I thought about strategic positioning. For 7 years, I'd let Veronica position herself as the creative, spontaneous one, while I was the responsible, predictable one. I'd accepted that dynamic without questioning whether it served me or just served her. But Stockholm had shown me something different. Here, I wasn't Veronica's husband, the man who cleaned up her messes and financed her adventures. I was just Connell, someone interesting enough to include in dinner conversations, someone worth helping when he needed support. That evening, Elsa and I had dinner at a restaurant she'd been wanting to try. The food was excellent, but what I remembered most was the conversation. She asked me about my dreams, about the bridges I wanted to design, about the places I wanted to travel. Not places we should go together or places that would make good stories, but places I actually wanted to see. "I've always wanted to visit Japan," I said. "The engineering there is incredible. They've figured out how to build structures that can flex with earthquakes instead of fighting them. Why haven't you gone?" I thought about it. Veronica says Asia is too overwhelming. Too many people. Too different. What do you say? It was such a simple question, but I realized I hadn't been asked it in years. What did I say? What did I want? I say I want to see how they build things to bend without breaking. Elsa nodded. That sounds like something worth seeing. That night, I made my decision. On day 7, exactly 1 week after Veronica's midnight escape, I sent her a single text message. Thanks for this, honey. Elsa has been so sweet. My phone rang within 30 seconds. Who the hell is Elsa? Veronica's voice was sharp, higher than usual. A marine biologist. She helped me when I was stranded and confused after my wife abandoned me in a foreign country. I didn't abandon you, You changed my flight without telling me, took the first plane home, and left me to figure it out alone. In what world is that not abandonment? Silence. Then, it was supposed to be funny. Explain the joke to me, Veronica. Break it down. What part was supposed to make me laugh? You always overthink everything. I thought if I forced you to be spontaneous, by leaving me stranded without money or a way home. You have credit cards. You're not helpless. I was walking through Stockholm as we talked, heading to meet Elsa for coffee. The morning light reflected off the water, and people were starting their day with a calm purposefulness that I'd grown to love. You're right, I said. I'm not helpless. I figured that out this week. So you can come home and we can laugh about this whole thing. Actually, I've been thinking about that. About home. About what kind of person abandons their spouse as entertainment. Her voice changed. What do you mean? I mean, I'm considering staying in Sweden for a while longer, maybe a lot longer. You can't be serious. Elsa helped me understand something this week. She showed me what it feels like when someone actually cares about your well-being instead of just looking for their next source of amusement. The line was quiet for a long moment. Then Veronica started talking very fast. Connell, you're being ridiculous. You can't throw away our marriage over some Swedish woman you just met. I was trying to help you be more adventurous. You're always so rigid, so planned out. I thought if I pushed you out of your comfort zone. You thought wrong. I ended the call. Within an hour, she'd called back 17 times. Over the next month, Veronica made 51 desperate calls. I answered exactly one of them, 3 weeks later, when she was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, she sobbed. Your sister won't talk to me. Tyler told all our friends what I did. My own mother said she's embarrassed by me. What did you think would happen, Veronica? When people found out you'd snuck out of our hotel at 3 a.m. to abandon your sleeping husband in a foreign country, what did you think they'd say? That it was creative. That it was bold. It wasn't creative. It was cruel. And now people can see that. She tried to argue, to explain, to convince me that I was overreacting. But her words felt thin and desperate. Nothing like the confident certainty she'd had when she was texting me about her hilarious escape. I stayed in Stockholm for 2 more months. Elsa and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into something neither of us rushed to define but both of us treasured. She showed me Sweden through her eyes, and I showed her what it looked like to have someone who kept their promises, who showed up when they said they would, who considered her feelings before making decisions that affected them both. The divorce papers were filed remotely. Veronica's midnight abandonment, documented in hotel records and airline confirmations, made the proceedings straightforward. Her lawyer advised her not to contest anything. By the time I returned to Kentucky to pack my belongings, Veronica had become a cautionary tale in our social circle. Friends whispered about the woman who thought psychological cruelty was entertainment, who had planned her husband's abandonment like a practical joke and then couldn't understand why no one was laughing. Her professional reputation suffered when colleagues learned about her midnight escape. The story spread through her architecture firm, where trust and reliability were essential for client relationships. Partners began questioning her judgment on projects, wondering what other creative solutions she might implement without warning or consent. Veronica's family relationships deteriorated as the full scope of her behavior became clear. Her mother, horrified by the midnight abandonment story, began recalling other incidents where Veronica had prioritized her own entertainment over other people's well-being. Her younger brother, who had always defended her spontaneity, admitted he'd started making backup plans whenever she was involved in family events, never quite trusting that she'd follow through on commitments. The most devastating consequence was her isolation. Friends who had once admired her unpredictability began to see it as unreliability. Social invitations stopped coming when people realized that including Veronica meant risking their own plans being derailed for her amusement. She became known as the woman who couldn't be trusted with anything important, whose idea of creativity was other people's crisis. 6 months later, I stood on a research vessel in the Arctic Ocean, working as a consulting engineer for Elsa's climate research team. The midnight sun painted the ice in shades of gold and pink, and I understood that Veronica's cruel midnight escape had inadvertently led me to discover both authentic love and the strength to choose relationships built on trust rather than psychological manipulation.